morning, everyone. There's a couple matters we need to make a record on before the jury comes in, and for the purposes of the record, the defendant is present along with his counsel and counsel for the state. Unfortunately, we have one of our jurors that has become ill. It was juror number 33. And by my notes, then juror number 48 would take the position or place of juror number 33. Does the state agree?
Yes, Your Honor.
And defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And then, Mr. Puentes, do you wish to make a record with your client as far as testimony this morning?
I do, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you. I'm going to get you a microphone, Mr. Behal. As with last time, just to make sure the court reporter can hear you, can you just say something into it?
Yeah.
All right. So, you remember Friday afternoon, we had a discussion. I referred to it as a colloquy. Do you recall that?
I do.
That was done on the record like we're doing it now. Is that correct?
Yes.
At that point in time, I sort of walked you through your right against self-incrimination, correct?
Yes.
We talked at length about how the state, the defense, or the court cannot force you to testify if you should elect not to. Do you recall that conversation?
I do.
Did you fully grasp and understand the conversation on Friday afternoon?
I did.
But after having the weekend, it was brought to my attention there's been somewhat of a change of heart. Is that correct?
That is.
And I guess I'll just ask you frankly, has there been a change with respect to whether or not you wish to testify on your own behalf?
Yes.
And what is that change?
I would like to testify on my own behalf.
And are you certain with respect to your decision at this time?
Yeah.
And is that decision made knowingly?
Yes.
Is it made intelligently?
Yes.
And is it made voluntarily?
Yes.
Your Honor.
Does the state believe there's any further colloquy needed?
No, Your Honor.
All right. The court, based on the defendant's statements and the questioning by his counsel, makes the finding that the defendant has made a knowing and voluntary election to testify in his own defense. Is there any further record to be made at this time?
Not on behalf of the state, Your Honor.
I do want to say briefly, one of our witnesses, we kind of discussed informally, but has some issues at home. He is present, so we're actually going to call him first, and then we'll call Mr. Behal second. That's
all right. Okay, we'll bring the jury in then. You may be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The defense may call its first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would call Dr. Doyle.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please have a seat there. You may proceed.
Good morning, Dr. Doyle. Could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Yes, my name is Al, A-L, Doyle, D like in dog, O-I-L-E.
And Dr. Doyle, you've your wife has recently had some health issues, is that right?
Yeah, for about 8 years, but it's been really bad lately, yes.
Okay. And typically we have a CV or resume from our physician, but we're going to go through that on the record due to the issues with your wife being in the hospital recently, okay? Does that sound okay?
That's good. She actually is still in the hospital.
Oh, she's still in the hospital. Okay, so are you a physician duly licensed to practice medicine in the state of Iowa?
Yes.
Are you also licensed to practice in the state of Illinois?
I'm sorry, state of Illinois is where I'm licensed. I'm not licensed in Iowa.
Okay.
I have been in the past.
Okay, so you're currently licensed to practice in Illinois and not currently licensed to practice in Iowa, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and when were you licensed in Illinois?
1993.
Okay, and what about, do you recall the dates that you were licensed in Iowa?
1997 to 2010.
And can you describe your educational background for me?
I went to Augustana, magna cum laude in Phi Beta Kappa, majored in math and religion, Danforth Fellow, all that kind of thing. Then went to University of Chicago's Divinity School, only stayed there for a year. Then came back and worked for John Deere for 11 years, and then went to medical school at Rush in Chicago, and then to residency at Loyola, also right outside of Chicago, where I was the resident of the year my junior year and the research resident of the year my senior year. I was also in medical school the Dayton Bayless Scholar on Humanities at the medical school. Since that time, I've also gone to Gestalt training for 2 years as a Gestalt therapist, and then moved back to the Quad Cities and have been here since 1997.
Okay, thank you. That's a lot that we'll go through here in a moment. So what are you, do you have a specialization?
Yes, I was board certified in general psychiatry, so for adults and children, back in 1999, and then in 2000, I wish I had brought my own CV, 2003 or so, I got board certified by the American Board of Addiction Medicine.
And what does board certified mean?
It means you go through certain training in person, and then you go through usually an 8-hour test or so.
And does that require, you talked about your residency. Was your residency in psychiatry or addiction medicine or
It
both?
was in psychiatry.
Okay.
In psychiatry.
And how did, it looks like, so in 1999 and then approximately in 2003, or 1999 is when you were board certified in psychiatry, and then in 2003 is when you got the certification in addiction medicine. What led you to that point?
That was always an interest of mine. The reason I chose Loyola for residency was to work under a particular Dr. Walter Doris, who had retired. So then I worked under Amin Dagestani, who were both well-known scholars in the addiction medicine field.
Okay, and what is addiction medicine?
Well, within, it's really broader than psychiatry because it includes the medical side of the addiction process. So we can take people through withdrawal and detoxify them. That's the difference between just a regular addictionologist and one who has the medicine degree. So all forms of addiction, both the physical and the mental, emotional parts of it is what addiction medicine is about.
And does addiction focus on alcohol addiction and drug addiction, or is there something outside of that?
Those are the main focuses, but in the modern age, we pick up sexual addiction, cyber addiction, we pick up pretty much food.
Okay, so, but back in 2003, you would have been focused more on the chemical side of it, substance abuse.
Yes, I was the medical director of Genesis Mark Unit at that point.
Okay.
Was that for 7 years.
And was that before or after you were board certified in addiction medicine?
It was during that time.
Okay. And you stated that you achieved a couple of awards while you were resident of the year, and then there was another one?
Research Resident of the Year.
Research resident. And what's the difference between, can you explain what those are?
Resident of the Year was just a general award for all areas. The research was where we were actually working with, mine was in PTSD, working on a particular field within psychiatry or addiction medicine, and got the award for that.
And how many, is it difficult to get these awards?
Yes.
Can you explain how difficult?
It's by faculty vote. So you usually put up with several, and then the faculty vote. So at least on Resident of the Year, supposedly I was unanimous. The next one, I'm not sure if I was or not.
Okay. So on both of these, the resident of the year and the research resident, the faculty votes?
Yes.
Okay. And how big is the faculty, or was the faculty when you were there?
40, 30, somewhere in that range.
You also stated that you were a Dayton Baylor scholar?
Bayless.
Bayless.
At Rush, the medical school, they always had a funded position that was for a person who could broach the gap between the humanities and the hardcore sciences.
Okay. And can you, when did you receive that award?
1993.
And what was your work in that, when you were that scholar? What work did you do in that field?
You're talking about the Dayton Bayless one? I taught classes to the medical students on positions in literature, positions who had been poets or other scholars, and taught those classes to the medical students. I was a medical student.
So this is while you were a student, not while you were already a resident?
Right, I was still a medical student.
Okay. And then you also stated that you were a Gestalt, I believe, therapist?
It's a form of psychology after Freud and Jung, the original founders, developed by Frederick Perls. I don't know if you want me to go into the theory behind it, but it's a form of psychotherapy.
Okay. And when did you do that?
That would have been from 97 until 2000.
Were you ever published?
Only in a group on my PTSD studies during medical school.
Okay. And what did you publish?
It was on the effects of late-term onset of PTSD. So we looked at Vietnam vets who had come back, apparently been successful even, and then 40 or 45, when they reached that age, all of a sudden they had a complete breakdown and were never able to recover. So it was considered delayed onset PTSD.
And then more recently, what specific experiences do you have in dealing with and treating substance abuse, chemical dependency?
As I mentioned, I was the medical director of the Genesis, the Mark Unit Multiple Addictions Recovery Center. I was that for 7 years. Then went out into my own clinic and ran, I believe, the only Medicaid accepting heroin addicts who would go on buprenorphine. I was trained in that as well. It's a substitute for heroin. It gets people off heroin without them being stupefied, as heroin would do. And it curbs craving. Called Suboxone. It's been in the news a lot. Suboxone.
Thank you. And Your Honor, prior to today, Dr. Doyle, have you ever been qualified as an expert in the courts of the state of Iowa or Illinois?
Both.
Okay.
I worked for the state itself for the seriously mentally ill who were criminals. So criminally insane is what they call it in Illinois. I worked with them off and on for 2 years when I moved into semi-retirement.
And when did you move into semi-retirement?
2 years ago.
Are you retired today, or are you still-
Semi-retired. I decided to come back out of it. It's too boring. So had to get back into it.
And approximately how many times have you been qualified as an expert in Iowa?
In Iowa, it would probably be only 3 or 4 times. In Illinois, it'd be at least a dozen, maybe several dozen. I've not kept count.
And prior to today, have you ever been qualified as an expert in any other states besides Iowa or Illinois?
No, ma'am.
Your Honor, I would offer Dr. Doyle as an expert in the field of substance abuse, chemical dependency, alcoholism.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Dr. Doyle, we haven't met in person, but we have spoken on the phone, or via text, I guess, to discuss your testimony today. Is that right?
Correct.
And are you being compensated for those calls and your time in court today?
Yes.
Okay. And how much are you being compensated?
I think we agreed at $200 an hour.
Did you review any particular documents or evidence in this case to prepare for your testimony today?
Only in general, I checked the newspaper articles on it and some of the material that you had sent over. I'd looked through some of that and our discussions.
Okay. So I want to move then to your specialty in addiction medicine and alcoholism. Can you explain what happens, or before we move to that, would kind of a basic depiction of the human brain help you or aid you in some way in describing the effects of alcohol on the brain?
It might help. I think I could describe it with words only, and if it's not, you could let me know.
Okay. So can you explain what happens when alcohol is taken into the human body, just in general?
Well, it's a suppressant.
And can you describe what suppressant means?
Your brain has a certain state of activity, and if you are a chemical called GABA, when that is increased, your brain's activity sends messages to the muscles to relax. That's why people will drink to relax. It relaxes the muscles through this GABA mechanism. On the other side, there's a equivalent chemical on the other side called glutamate, which tends to be excitatory. So that's what would get like people who are on cocaine, methamphetamine, those are excitatory. So we'll get those guys even to the point to where they shake because their brain is sending out so many fast and furious chemicals.
Okay. So it's my understanding that this chemical GABA, with respect to how alcohol affects the body, it relaxes, puts somebody in a relaxed state.
Or even in a coma.
It can go that far?
Mm-hmm.
And can you explain what happens to your brain specifically when alcohol is in the body?
it hits every system of the brain. So whereas some of our modern chemicals, let's say Ativan, is only toward the parts that have to do with the, I don't want to get too in, but to the GABA parts of the brain, but it's very specific, whereas alcohol just smashes everything. It's like a sledgehammer to the brain. So every part of the brain is affected.
Okay. And does that include memory?
Most assuredly.
And how does alcohol affect memory?
Of course, all of this is theory, but the main notion is that as we store memories, we have an area that is for short-term memory, and in order to move that into long-term memory, underneath on the bottom side of the brain, there's two little, they look like women's breasts, so they're called the mammillary bodies. To go from short-term memory to longer-term memory, you have to go through that little process of the mammillary bodies. In a wet brain, or Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, the neurons in that section are, in fact, they turn from pink to black. So they're burned out. So the person can have no longer-term memories beyond just short-term memory. While the person is really drunk, they reach a point, usually 200 or better. That'd be 0.2. I'm used to speaking, like, instead of 0.08, I say 80 because it's a different measurement. But at 0.2, most people start having problems with their memory, speech, maybe even walking. But as far as the memory is concerned, the memory body's part is blocked by the alcohol. So you don't go from short-term memory into long-term memory.
Okay, so when alcohol, and is that as soon as you start taking in alcohol, or is this at some?
After you reach a certain point.
Okay. And are there stages of kind of alcohol intoxication within a human body that each body goes through?
Yes, we've, in general, for driving, so that's it's time that they look at physical impairment, they look at 0.08. It was originally 0.1. If some of you older people remember, it was 0.1. They moved it down to 0.08 because they found that there was, in that small amount, there were several people that still were impaired. Many people impaired from 0.08 to 0.1. Then the next stage, most people go around 200, slurring their words, staggering with some people, some not. 300, the average person would really be sick and probably have to go to the hospital. Children would die. 400, most regular drinkers would die at 400, alcohol poisoning. Typical, and then above that 500, most normals would not survive it. Alcoholics, however, can get such a well-established tolerance that even at high doses, they function, even though they may not be remembered, but they are functioning day to day. And I've had some that, when I was working at the MARC unit, that came in at almost 500, and they didn't appear drunk till they were down to 300. So I don't know if I make myself clear or not, but 300 seems to be the stopping over point where you're getting into serious issues.
And that's for the non-alcoholic, is that right? Or the alcoholic as well?
For the alcoholic, as he's coming down, that seems to be the place where their withdrawal really becomes prominent. Whereas a normal person wouldn't have withdrawal really of any significance. But for the normal person, 300 would be a great impairment.
And when a person is intoxicated, what are the short-term effects of the alcohol on the body?
Since it's hitting all those GABA receptors that are throughout the brain and the body, everything relaxes. So it can get to the point where, I think a common phrase is limber-legged. So a person's kind of staggering and not getting around well. They have ataxia. Sometimes they'll have problems with their eyes. Of course, mouth, so they'll start slurring their words or being unable to speak. I don't know if that's sufficient or not, is it?
Could you explain what you mentioned a word ataxia? What is that?
That means not being able, impaired gait, impaired walking.
Okay. So would that be described kind of like as balance problems?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
And if you know, I assume you know like some of the field sobriety tests that police officers take people through. Is that right? Yes?
Yes, I've been through that training for that myself.
So in some of those, and one of those, they have the person try to walk in a straight line. And so an alcoholic wouldn't be able to do that, is that right? Or not an alcoholic, an intoxicated person would not be able to do that, is that right?
Probably not unless they are a chronic alcoholic and have a tolerance so that they could still be at 200 and walk a straight line.
Okay. And there's also like a one-leg stand test, so you stand on one leg to try and balance. Would that also affect the balance at that point?
Most assuredly.
Okay. And then you mentioned eyes, that there's an issue with the eyes. Can you describe what happens with the eyes?
The phrase that's used is visual ataxia, so it's like problems with your eyes being able to stay steady. So you might roll your eyes around, or with some drugs it'll actually make them shake. Called nystagmus, Nystagmus.
Okay. And this nystagmus, does that cause some of the difficulty with a person being able to balance because their eyes are bouncing back and forth?
It can be, but again, that would be a later, it's the gait, walking ataxia that comes well before you have visual ataxia.
And by well before, how much well before?
Only in terms of, you would probably be staggering at 200 to 300. You wouldn't get the eye nystagmus until probably into the 400s for the typical person.
Okay. And that's not for the alcoholic, that's for just a general lay person, is that right?
Correct.
Or I shouldn't say lay person, but person that doesn't have the alcohol dependence. And does the slurring, when does the slurring of speech come?
At about 200. For the non-alcoholic.
For the non-alcoholic. And then for the alcoholic, when do these things occur?
It would be hard to say because it depends on how long and how much they've been drinking. For example, I mentioned earlier about 300 being when many of the alcoholics would, not until they were down to 300 did they start showing withdrawal symptoms, even though their blood alcohol is still 300. Okay? So their tolerance is so high that at 300 they may run a company.
And in your experience, so they can still, there's a term called functional alcoholics.
Correct.
Right? And can you describe what that means?
Well, it means that the person is still able to function their regular activities of daily living and day-to-day life at a fairly normal level, even though they're drinking a lot. They don't tend to go through withdrawals as bad because they can drink the next morning. The hair of the dog that bit you, so you get up in the morning and start drinking, and that will usually kick the person out of withdrawal.
And so an alcoholic then, or somebody with alcohol, a dependency on alcohol, or who has formed that, are you able to, other than maybe the smell of alcohol on them, are you able to notice that because they're functional?
You might not. Typical trick is halls. So they'll use halls or cough drops to kind of cover that smell that people might pick up. So.
Okay, so some people that are alcoholics have picked up on the smell and trying to keep that out of their breath?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that a yes?
Yes.
What are the long-term effects of alcohol on the brain and on the body?
As I mentioned earlier, the wet brain syndrome, that's Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, and what that does is completely burn out the mammillary bodies that are the part of the memory circuits of the brain. But beyond that, they can have long-term problems with their gait, their walk. So a typical alcoholic has to have a wider base to their gait. Otherwise, if they bring their feet in, they can't keep their balance. So balance issues, really every organ of the body could go. You can get, of course, liver issues, kidney issues, heart issues, muscle, so you can get really just kind of, unlike a muscle, more like you'd think of as something that had been dried meat. Their muscles would just start atrophying. Skin can have problems, have blotchy skin, have all sorts of blood issues. So long-term effects are devastating, bleeding to death in some people. And then there's also communicable diseases that people get while they're drunk. So that also enters into long-term outlook.
And when do you start to see some of these long-term effects happening in a person that has alcohol
It
dependence?
could vary greatly. I don't think you'd see it probably before a year, but even within a year, you can have a person who's done so much heavy drinking on a fairly fresh brain that just kind of puts it over the edge at a very quick time. Usually, though, you're looking at more like 15, 20, 30 years into that kind of length of time.
And does it differentiate between men and, is there a difference between men and women who drink or are alcoholics? Or?
Yes, there is.
And when does it affect men or women more, or can you describe it?
Women more. And it seems to more after they've gone through menopause. Now, I don't know exactly all the science. I got theories, but I don't know the science. But after menopause, it seems that some of the estrogen protection, maybe it's just because she's a mother or whatever else, but after menopause tends to very rapidly lead a woman actually to death. The reasons for that is because women have shorter bowels to have the alcohol transfer through, so more gets put into the system. And also their ability to process the alcohol is slower, so it just keeps recirculating in the woman.
Okay. And
I've had more women after menopause die from alcoholism than I have men. So it's really devastating for a woman if she continues to drink into older age.
okay. And so if you have two people that are relatively the same age and are drinking about the same amounts, one's a man and one's a woman, how these long-term effects that you talked about that affect the kidney, the liver, the
Heart, brain, muscles,
heart, and
blood
those kind
system.
of things, what kind of time frame are we looking at? Let's say the person's in their 30s, or the people.
I've had patients in their 30s who had this complete Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. So every day I would have to reintroduce myself to the patient if they were in the hospital. Every day they wouldn't remember from day to day what my name was. Wouldn't remember their own children's names if they had occurred after the Wernicke-Korsakoff had set in. So I've had them as early as 30, and I've had many up into the 60s.
And with respects to somebody that's got alcoholism, do you see them able to control their drinking?
Now, that's part of the definition of alcoholism, is that they can't control it. They continue to drink even though there's negative consequences. They start out to drink, I'm only going to have this much. And it's always more than that, or almost all. And if it's not tonight more than that, then tomorrow night will be a real bender that they put on. So there's very little control, or virtually none, in many alcoholics.
And so if an alcoholic isn't drinking today and and puts alcohol in his body, does that start that process all over?
Seems to trigger it, yes.
Okay, so let's say somebody's been sober and not drinking for a year, and then they start drinking again, what happens?
Well, again, depending on their age, many of the physical problems have been corrected. So a person, since the liver is one of the organs, it's a calyx organ, K-A-L-Y-X, calyx organ, so it can reproduce itself. So that's why a mother can donate a quarter of her kidney to her child, of her liver to her child, and the child then end up growing up to have normal liver functions. So it can reproduce itself. Once it goes past a certain point, it becomes so scarred from so many assaults of the alcohol trying to process all the poison through the liver, that it reaches a point where it becomes cirrhotic and cannot be regenerate itself.
And
Did I
by-
answer your question? I think I got caught up in my, did I answer your question?
So, I'm gonna ask you another question. So you talked about cirrhosis or
Yes.
cirrhotic. Is that cirrhosis of the liver?
Yes.
Okay. And with respect to, that cirrhosis, that's something that happens later in the process?
Typically, yes.
Okay. So with respect to somebody, let's say somebody's stopped drinking, they're an alcoholic, they've stopped drinking for a year, and then something happens, and they pick up a drink, right? What happens to their body if is it the moment that they pick up the drink, what happens at that moment? Do they have control?
If they're, depending on where they stopped the drinking, got that year, they may be able to heal it and come back to normal function. If they've gone beyond that point, then there will be lifelong issues. Even for the person who has been sober a year, and in that person, since your brain, we know how to tie our shoes because our mothers taught us when we were 4 or 5. Brain cells are as old as you are. In fact, our oldest brain cells go back to probably somewhere in the 7th or 6th month of the pregnancy. Otherwise, they're paired off, they're cut off, and specialize in various areas. If the person has gone beyond a certain point with their, as I mentioned, like the mammillary bodies, it doesn't recover. If you go beyond a certain point with your liver, it becomes cirrhotic, and you will probably have to have a liver transplant if you can avoid drinking, and they'll allow you to get on the list. Did I answer your question again?
Yes.
All right.
With respect to a person's liver, if somebody's already starting to see problems, having a doctor tell them that they have problems with the liver, is that something that can be recovered at that point, or it's something that's already beyond that point?
If they've stopped before it's become cirrhotic, which I think is around 30% of your liver is still functioning, so if you go lower than that, then it's unlikely that you're going to be able to pull the liver back out of it.
And the only option then would be the transplant, is that right?
Correct.
What kind of psychological effects do you see on somebody that's got alcoholism?
Well, typically they already had psychological effects before they went into alcoholism. It is almost a form of self-medication, though I don't subscribe completely to that theory as the origins of alcoholism being self-medication. But it does at one point, the only way that you can stay normal is to continue to drink.
And do you see some things like mental health conditions starting to happen because of the alcoholism, such that it would affect maybe as well as sleep or other things?
Yes.
And can you describe a little bit about that, what mental health conditions typically are induced by alcoholism?
Well, since it's a disinhibitor, so it takes away your inhibitions, the old phrase is in vino veritas, so in wine the truth. Not necessarily the case, but things will come out that you have suppressed because you are now disinhibited, and it can come back in, different rates toward parents or others that you might have brought into your alcoholism. Typically, I am of the position that it's basically genetic disease. At least 75% seem to come from alcoholic clans, even if they aren't raised among the alcoholic clan. So going into alcoholism, in some ways you're set up for some issues.
And does alcohol affect sleep?
Oh, greatly, greatly. So typically the person says, I drink a few drinks or a few shots before I go to bed to sleep. within 46 hours, that person is usually waking back up and has to take some more shots if they want to get the full 8 hours. So it disrupts sleep that way, does not allow you to go in certain stages of sleep, chaotic sleep, nightmares, those sorts of things can frequently happen with a person who's an alcoholic.
And could you see somebody not being able to sleep that's an alcoholic, like having kind of insomnia?
Yes. Or they take a few shots and they'll sleep for an hour or two and then wake back up. So as far as long, restful sleep, typical alcoholic doesn't have that.
And with respect, do you ever see, with respect to psychology, some kind of impulse control problems
Yes.
with an alcoholic?
Yes.
Can you describe that?
Well, frequently be the person who's rageful, starts a bar fight, aggressive, those sorts of things, breaking furniture.
What about emotions and personality? Can you see change in that as well?
Yes, you can.
And
The
can-
whole Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that's a typical phrase among the AAers, that they are basically Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. When they're not drinking, they're Dr. Good Person. When they are drinking, they turn into a creature.
And creature meaning something that's not similar to Dr. Hyde, or the doctor, the good
Dr.
person?
Jekyll. Yeah, oftentimes it's the opposite. So a mild-mannered person becomes quite aggressive. Sometimes it will be the opposite.
And is it always that way? Is it, or can there be times where an alcoholic may seem normal within the drinking and then something happens?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So do you, with respect to this kind of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, is it something that happens like one time, or is it always, or is it somewhere in between that?
It'd be in between that, but if the person is truly alcoholic, repeaters repeat is the presidency. So sometimes a person, let's say they've lost their car. The only way that they can find their car is to get drunk again. So they get into that state-dependent learning. So whatever state they're in, if they learn that, that's the state they got to get back into to be able to remember what they were doing, or to retain what they've learned.
Okay, so with respect to an alcoholic, they would have to, if they've forgotten where their car or their keys are, they would have to get drunk again in order to find the car?
They might,
Okay,
or they may never find the car. I don't want to anybody who may be a drinker think if they've lost something that they should go drink to find it.
okay, so that's just one of the theories or one of the things that some alcoholics are able to do, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And
Let me, if I might, so let's say a person is aggressive when they're drunk, and that they've established that over time. Yes, almost in every time that they would get intoxicated to that level, they would get aggressive. So that's what I meant earlier about repeaters repeat. So the DUI guy who's never driving again gets his keys or beats his wife up to get the keys to go drive. That may be a pattern that he'd never do when he's sober.
okay, so this whole idea of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde comes from when a person is sober, they, like you said, they would never maybe go get the keys. No, if they were sober, they would put the keys away, knowing that they're going to drink. Is that right?
Yes, they would need the wife or some other person to hold their keys for them.
But the moment that they start drinking and get intoxicated, then that changes. Is that right?
Once they reach that level,
Okay. And so at that point, they've lost control of their what they're doing. Is that right?
yes. Most of us would think that for the alcoholic, even one is too many. fact, the phrase is, one is too many and 1,000 is never enough.
Okay, and what does that mean?
That means that if they have even one, they're probably going to set off things that make it where they drink until they can't drink anymore. Something has to stop them. Okay. And 1,000 never enough is that there's, I'm only going to have 4. Next thing you know, they've done 40.
Is there an idea, do we know when a person develops a tolerance to alcohol?
Be different from person to person. A lot having to do with genetics.
Okay, and also from men to women, it's different?
From men to women, body size. So there's lots of factors that have to do with it. So you see guys who are heavy drinkers, case a day of beer, and would not qualify for any of the typical questions that we used to establish that someone is an alcoholic. They wouldn't qualify for any of those, even though they're drinking that much a day.
Okay, and when you say these questions to establish alcohol, or if they're an alcoholic, you have a set kind of questions that you,
There's many of them.
okay. And so if somebody is drinking a case a day, that may not qualify them as an alcoholic, but however, they are actually an alcoholic, is that
Well, I
right?
don't know that they would be. Again, if they don't have loss of control, if they're not doing things that are outside of their character, and then various other things have to do with the definition of alcoholism, they may not be doing any of those things. So a typical test is called the cage. And the first question is, have you ever tried to cut down? The non-alcoholic will say no, because there was no reason for them to ever cut down. The alcoholic may or may not say, depending on if they're telling the truth, but most alcoholics have tried to cut down at some point because they know the consequences are coming. And the next one, have you ever gotten angry or upset at somebody who confronted you about your alcoholism? Again, most non-alcoholics would never be confronted, and if they were, that would be patently untrue. The next one is, do you feel guilty about things you do while you're drinking? Typical alcoholic, if he's being truthful, will say yes, he does. He feels really terrible, but he doesn't know how to fix it, or only way he knows to fix it is go get drunk again. And the last one is, if you have ever had a person who got up in the morning to have the proverbial eye opener. So in the morning, you're shaking, you got to have something that's the eye opener that you wake up to. If any 2 of those are that I've mentioned out of the cage, C-A-G-E, any 2 of those are, you got about a 90% chance that you probably are drinking alcoholically.
Okay, so, and I think you described it, that CAGE is just the letters,
Cut down,
an acronym
angry,
that helps
guilt,
you.
eye opener. I'm sorry.
Cut down.
Angry, guilt, eye opener.
Okay. And I think we've talked about alcoholic seizures, but I want to kind of get into these, kind of this withdrawal or the seizure. When does that happen?
It varies. Typically, it happens on the 2nd or 3rd day, but I've had people have seizures when I was director at the Mark Unit on the 6th day after they've stopped drinking, even that far out. The older nurses tend to say it was vodka related. I'm not so sure if that's true or not, but they'd always put up a red flag if someone came in vodka dependent.
So there's a difference between even the amount, or not the amount, the sort of alcohol that you're drinking, or the kind of alcohol that you're drinking?
Depending on its content, yes, and how high it can make your blood alcohol level.
Okay. So is vodka more potent to the body?
As I say, I'm not so sure if that, but the older nurses, when I ran the Mark Unit, they always put out a sign that this person was vodka dependent because they extended the time that they looked for seizures.
Okay. And seizures indicate withdrawal, is that right?
Correct.
Can people die from those?
Yes.
And then there's another term that usually goes along with alcoholism that we haven't talked about, and that's blackout.
Blackouts, yes.
Can you describe what that is?
Well, in layman's terms, it's like automatic pilot. You're still functioning. Other people may think that you are not intoxicated. You may appear that way, but you are actually not recording anything through that mammillary body part that I mentioned, brain part that I mentioned earlier.
So can an alcoholic experience a blackout, or how long do these blackouts last? Let me go there first.
That would be very dependent on each individual. It may just be little as, I don't remember going by Ted's house, but it's only that half an hour at Ted's house that you don't remember. But it could be whole weekends. I mean there's that famous movie, Ray Milland on Lost Weekend.
And during the time that an alcoholic, say, is in a blackout, is he still functioning
Yes.
completely like a human being?
Yes, I hear a story often that, Doc, they'd give me the keys to drive and I was in complete blackout when I was doing it. Because the others were staggering that and he wasn't staggering yet. He had such a high tolerance. But he was still in a blackout, not recording.
Okay. And blackout means they're not recording on those,
Through the mammillary bodies to move it from short-term to long-term memory. Right.
and is a person able to recall that ever? That blacked out memory or that blacked out time?
They might come back to like snippets, like just a flash, just like somebody's taking a snapshot of a photograph, not a video. Occasionally you might have a little short video that they'll recall of that night, but then the grander night, no, they do not remember, and it probably will not be retainable because they have burned out the pathway to make it a long-term memory. It just isn't there.
Okay. And when they have these snippets or kind of flashes of their memory in this blackout, do they try to make sense of that?
Typically, and very serious alcoholics will, in fact, fill in the time that they've forgotten. It's called confabulation. Brain doesn't like gaps, so their brain will start filling in the gaps with memories that they actually kind of make up. Confabulation, they fabulate the memories.
And so if somebody is in a blackout, they might make up what happened, even though it's not the truth. Is that right?
Correct. But they would believe it was the truth. That's, confabulation means they actually believe it is the truth. Their brain has filled in that gap.
And the alcoholic themselves believes it, and then the people that are listening to it would actually believe it as well. Is that right?
They might.
Okay. Unless it's maybe a wife or somebody that's been around for a while, right?
And knows, yes.
Okay. When alcoholics, I think you kind of talked about this a little bit, but when we were talking about blackouts, that with respect to an alcoholic that's in a blackout, and the person is given the keys to the car because they, the other people aren't, I believe they're more functional or able to drive than the other ones. Could these others even believe that they were kind of lucid or almost more sober?
I got lost in your pronouns. So
Sorry.
who are we talking about?
So, if we have a person that's in a blackout, an alcoholic in a blackout, could others believe that that person is lucid?
Yes, that's why they give him the keys. He seems the least intoxicated, seems the least impaired, though in fact he's in a blackout and might have a very high blood alcohol level, higher than his others who are feeling the effects and are staggering and don't think they can drive.
And I just want to get into one kind of more topic, and that's that we've talked a little bit about, and that's these points. Three, if somebody's an alcoholic in a 0.3 or a 300, as you would say it, what would you expect to see from that person?
Maybe nothing. I've had people that were high up in different companies in the area and they functioned perfectly well, and as I say, they're functioning at 300. And maybe at the last drunk they got up to 450 or 500 it's not until they get down to 300 that they start feeling the withdrawal. Like we would if we went from 200 down to 0, we'd feel the withdrawal at 100. They're going from 500, let's say, down to 300, and then they start feeling the withdrawal. But otherwise, they're functioning quite well.
Thank you, Your Doctor. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
You were just discussing the idea of confabulation, that a serious alcoholic who is a blackout state, their brain may try to fill in the gaps and they end up with false memories. Is that right?
Correct. In some, I don't want to, that's not like a blanket statement for all, but in some alcoholics, yes.
Right, so it can happen to some alcoholics?
Yes,
Can you also have alcoholics in a blackout state where they have those snippets and flashes of memory you mentioned, where those snippets and flashes are actual memories,
yes,
not made up?
not made up.
Okay. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Nothing
Anyway.
further.
You may step down.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break at this time. I know it's a little bit earlier, but we're going to take a break. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, I'm reminding you of your admonition. Please do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Please continue to keep an open and attentive mind. We'll be in adjournment for about 10-15 minutes. Thank you.
All rise for the jury.
You may be seated. The defense may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Christopher Behal.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please have a seat there. You may proceed, Mr. Prentice.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Behal, just, I guess to make the record complete, please state your name and spell it for the record.
Christopher Behal, Christopher Behal.
And how old are you, Mr. Behal?
31.
Where are you from?
Davenport, Iowa.
Born and raised?
Born, raised in Durant for most of it.
Okay. You go to Durant High School, for example?
I did.
Okay. And what brought you back ultimately to the Davenport area?
We moved right before the end of my senior year, and that's where I've been since until I moved to Eldridge.
Okay. And when you say we, I presume that's you and your parents?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. What did you do for work?
Mainly manufacturing.
Okay. Is there any specific training that you, that was required, I guess, for that particular position?
CNC training.
And what is that?
Basically running brake presses or lasers and then fork trucks as well.
Okay. Is that like classroom work or is that on the job training?
Mainly on the job training, yeah.
You know an individual by the name of Taylor Escontrias, is that correct?
I do.
And how do you know Taylor?
She was my girlfriend, and we met at Country Oaks, which is a rehab facility.
What year, if you can recall, did you meet Taylor?
2023 or 2022, one of those.
Okay. And you mentioned Country Oaks. Is there like another name or moniker that it goes by?
Not that I'm aware of,
Okay.
other than just Oaks, but
Okay. Is it associated with CADS? Are you familiar with that?
I believe it's partially associated with CADS. I don't know if it's completely like a co-op unit or how that works.
Okay. Now, this is detox, rehab, or both?
It's no longer detox, it's just rehab. It was in the past a detox and rehab facility.
Is it residential?
Yes.
Okay. Can you just kind of explain, when you get rehabilitation there, what does that look like? Like, what's the process?
Now, when you get rehabilitated there, you get you get on board there. You go in, you get signed on, and then you start off with a 21-day course, I believe is what they are right now. And you sit through classes every day. I don't know, I want to say 8 to 10 hours a day for 21 days until you complete that course, and then you can stay on for a extended period of time in their halfway house. And I think you can stay up to 90 days extra in the halfway house program while you're still doing classes and getting interviews for jobs and trying to get rehabilitated back into society.
Okay. And is that, at least that second half that you referenced, that halfway house portion, is that voluntary or is that like a requirement for the program?
It is voluntary, yes.
So in essence, if you think you need that extra help, you can ask to be in the halfway house?
Yes.
Okay. And was that the first time you'd ever sought rehabilitation for alcoholism?
No, it is not.
And I guess I should ask you that. Were you receiving it for alcohol or for drugs or for something else?
I was receiving it for alcohol.
And how many times did you try to complete that or any program with respect to rehab?
It would have been that would have been my second time at Country Oaks, and I had also gone to outpatient, I believe, 2 other times.
Okay, so you had 4 attempts at rehabilitation for alcoholism, is that correct?
That is
Okay, and if I understand you correctly, 2 of those were in an outpatient capacity,
they were
and then 2 of them were residential.
correct.
In what order, if you can recall, were they?
Want to say inpatient or residential at Oaks, and then outpatient at Rosecrans, and then inpatient again at Country Oaks, and then outpatient at Cats.
And why the variance? Like, why outpatient versus inpatient for you?
Part of it was because of jobs at the time, so I could still keep working and do rehab at the same time.
Can you work while you're receiving inpatient treatment or inpatient rehab at Country Oaks or a facility of that type?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Your job can be put on hold, but you're not, unless you're in the halfway house program, you're not able to work and continue your rehab.
So maybe a silly question, but I think a necessary one. Why were you seeking rehabilitation at all?
Because my alcohol dependency had basically thrown my life into an unmanageable mess.
I think that's fairly specific, but can you give any more detail about the ways in which alcohol has affected or impaired your life?
I have 2 DUIs. I've lost multiple jobs, the same job multiple times. I've lost friends, I've lost respect, I've lost family, I've lost a lot because of my alcohol issues.
Now, I understand based on, I think, an interview that you had that was presented to this jury already, that you have some other conditions that you receive medication for, is that correct?
Correct.
Some of those are physical, some of those are mental or intellectual. What are the medications you take for mental health?
I take sertraline for anxiety and depression.
Can you spell that if you know?
SERTRALIN, I believe.
I think there's an E in there for purposes of the record, but you are correct. And what is that medication for?
Anxiety and depression.
Okay. Any other mental health diagnoses that you have?
No.
Obviously, you've expressed already what alcohol has done, how it affected you. How did it make you feel about yourself?
Worthless. I mean, basically, that's the gist of it, because I mean, that's what it did to my life, is made it worthless, because all I did was losing jobs and respect and everything that made my life.
Now, what was your drink of choice?
Vodka.
Were you the type of drinker that would drink anything that was on hand, or was it always and only vodka?
It was anything on hand.
Okay. But it sounds like if you had a choice, you would be purchasing vodka, or at least get access to it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Would you monitor in any way your alcohol intake? For example, would you cut yourself off at a certain point, or would you drink till the bottle was empty?
Most of the time it would be drinking till the bottle's empty. I had multiple times tried just drink, just this much, this little amount, this bottle, and not anymore. happen. That rarely was effective, though.
Now, when, if you can recall, did your drinking, what age were you, I guess, when it started to really significantly affect your life?
I would say around the age of 23 and 24.
So I'm doing the math right, about 6 or 7 years ago?
Yeah.
And did it kind of happen all at once, or did it just kind of gradually happen?
It gradually happened. At first, it wasn't really a problem. You know, it was just casual drinking with friends or by myself. It wasn't really by myself at that time. I mean, it gradually became just by myself, but it was just fun, lighthearted drinking, and then it became something where it was kind of necessary, more or less, to function on a day-to-day basis.
Are you familiar with the term withdrawal?
Yes.
Did you ever experience a withdrawal?
Yes.
How, if at all, would it impact you? Like, what symptoms would you have?
Incessant vomiting, lack of sleep. Sometimes I would go days without being able to sleep. I would be shaky. I would be unable to move very steadily for a day or two after. Grogginess, unable to eat, unable to drink fluids without throwing up almost immediately. And then seizures. I started developing seizures about 2018, so 7 years ago.
Were you ever given an understanding for why all of a sudden you were seizing as it related to a withdrawal symptom?
I was never given a clinical diagnosis. I had a couple of doctors say that they thought it was because of withdrawal, but I never actually had a concrete, this is this reason. I had gone to a neurologist that basically told me he had no idea.
But you were never prescribed medication for seizures, is that right?
I believe I was prescribed it within the last last 2 months before, or last month before, March 2024. But I wasn't able to fulfill it because I didn't have the funds to buy the prescription.
Okay, so you received the script, but you never filled the script?
Correct.
Okay, so you never took the medication?
No.
Now, how long after sort of your last drop, the bottle's now empty, would it take you to start being symptomatic?
For withdrawals?
Yes, sir.
Usually, after the last drop, it would usually be the next day. Usually waking up the next day, and then it would start to where, you know, the next couple days I wasn't able to sleep. I wasn't able to keep water down, and if I was, it was in very small quantities. Acid reflux was, you know, skyrocketed because I wasn't taking my medications during the time. And I wasn't able to keep anything down because I was vomiting all the time. So I mean, it started the next day.
And I apologize, I'm gonna ask you a question that's incredibly out of order, but are you right or left-handed?
I am right-handed.
Now I wanna circle back to Country Oaks. Is that a unisex program? Are both sexes accepted? How does that work? Like is it men's only or women's only, et cetera?
It is a unisex program.
Okay. But somehow I understand you came to know Taylor. Can you explain how that is in a unisex program?
Basically, it offers help with rehab for men and women for alcohol, drugs, or I think it's just alcohol and drugs dependencies. And so you're all in a classroom every day. Whoever's in the START program, you're seated in a classroom around males and females, and then your sleeping areas are separated, but so you sleep with the males and females sleep with the females.
When you're not in class or receiving treatment, is there like common areas or areas in which you can just kind of chat and familiarize yourselves with each other?
Yes, there's an area where we have classes that's free range for after classes are done in our free time. There's a pool table downstairs along with a movie room, and then there's the outdoor smoking area along with basketball court, and you can just, walk that little drag that they have out there that they allow you to keep within those confines.
Okay. And I understand that you and Taylor sort of hit it off. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, not at first, because I'm generally shy when it comes to new people, but we started talking, and then, I found excuses to help her out with cleaning up after lunch and cleaning up in the kitchen in the eating area, which is the same as our teaching area. And then outside smoking cigarettes, we just became associated with each other on a regular basis.
Okay. Was it friendly at this point, or was it romantic, or how would you have described your relationship at that point?
We were just friendly at first. It didn't really get into romantically until after the START program was done, and we both got into halfway together. And then we started texting each other. She would text me on my way to work and while I was at work, and we started texting every day. And then one day she kind of texted me and was like, I've been thinking about you a lot lately, and then it just kind of went from there.
Now, you use the word text, and sometimes that term is conflated. Would you actually communicate through conventional texting, or would it be through a messenger app or something else?
It would be through either text messages, Facebook, or Snapchat.
I take it you both had phones at that time?
We did.
And approximately how long, if you know, after you two met, did the relationship turn romantic?
Maybe a month and a half, 2 months after we met.
And what were the living arrangements at that point?
We had no determined living relationships. I remember asking her at one point if she had anywhere to go after this. She said no, and a couple days later I offered her, if I got an apartment, if she would like to move in, so she'd have a place to stay. And then progressively, towards the end of it, maybe a couple weeks before the end of it, she decided that she would move in with me, and so we ended up moving in with each other after the program ended.
And which complex, if you will, or apartment did you guys cohabitate?
At first, we lived in 104 Crestview, I believe, in apartment 1, and then we moved over to 105 Crestview in apartment 4.
Why the move? It sounds like it was a short move.
It was just a 1-bedroom at first until a 2-bedroom opened up. So the landlord let us live in that one until the 2-bedroom opened up.
And for the entirety of your relationship, was it a consistent boyfriend-girlfriend style relationship, or were you guys kind of on and off?
It was consistent.
Was it serious enough that either one of you met the other's family?
Yes, I met her mother and her stepfather, and she met the majority of my family.
Um, Now, I want to talk about March 13th, 2024, okay?
Okay.
Now, at this point, had you two resumed drinking again?
On March 13th?
Yeah, in other words, since you left the rehab facility together, did you stave off alcohol?
No, we started drinking the day after we left rehab.
So as of March 13th, 2024, you guys were back on the bottle?
Yes.
I want to just kind of go through that day to the best of your recollection. So I want to start with roughly when you woke up. Do you have any idea when you woke up that morning?
I would say around 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. And did you both wake up at about the same time, or did you guys wake up at different times?
I believe she woke up before me.
Did you guys share a bedroom?
Yes,
Okay, so you were in the same bed, correct?
correct.
When you got up, did you two formulate sort of a plan for the day, what you intended to do?
Yeah, our plan for that day was to go and donate plasma in Davenport.
Okay, and there's been some testimony about it, but I always forget the letters that start off that plasma place. What is it called?
CSL plasma?
Okay, and that's located downtown Davenport, is that right?
Yes,
Just a few blocks from here.
correct.
All right. And who drove, if you recall?
I drove.
Okay. Kind of speaks for itself, but what's the purpose of donating plasma?
The purpose for donating plasma was to gain extra money.
And did you make it to the plasma location?
We did.
Okay. Were you able to donate?
I was not.
Why not?
My blood pressure was too high.
Was Taylor able to donate?
Yes.
And did she do so?
Yes.
Approximately how long does that take?
About an hour.
Do they check things like blood alcohol level or anything? Like, what are the things that they check to make sure that you're available to donate?
They check your blood pressure, your weight, your plasma percentage. I don't know exactly what it is, and then your temperature, I believe.
But she passed whatever testing they had and she donated.
I believe she failed the first round, and then she went back for a retest and was able to donate, yes.
Okay. And did you do anything while she was donating?
I just sat out in the lobby on my phone until she was done.
Okay. And once you two left the plasma location, what'd you do?
We went to Aldi.
Okay. Remember what you purchased?
The only thing I remember was chocolate chip cookies.
Okay. And after Aldi, where'd you go?
The dollar store.
Okay. What purchases were made there?
Foundation, I believe.
Okay. And after the dollar store?
We went to Hy-Vee.
Just more food, I assume?
Soda.
And after that?
Casey's for vodka and cigarettes.
Now, which Casey's location was it?
The one right around the area of that Hy-Vee and dollar store on that main road in Eldridge.
Okay. So off LeClaire Road, that being the main road in Eldridge?
I believe so, if that's the road, yes.
Okay. So you stopped at Casey's and you purchased vodka, is that what you said?
Vodka and cigarettes, yes.
Okay. Do you know how much vodka you purchased?
A gallon.
And what type of vodka you purchased?
Hawkeye vodka.
And then, any other stops before you made it home?
McDonald's.
Okay. Again, just more food, I assume?
That is correct.
Okay. What time is it now that you are arriving home after these stops?
11-ish, noonish.
Okay. From the moment you woke up till this 11-ish, noonish time period, had you had any alcohol that day?
No.
When you got home, what did you guys do first?
We laid down for a little bit, and then, no, we scratched that. We went and ate lunch, and then we laid down for a little bit, both took a shower, and then we had sex. And then we played cards for a little while, listened to music. We went back to the bedroom, and then we had a cigarette, and then we laid down and talked. I started to turn the TV on, and then I realized that we were talking more, so I turned the TV back off. And we just sat talking about her family and my family, and that's the last thing I remember.
Now, how long after you arrived home with the vodka did you two start drinking?
Right after eating, so 20 minutes, half an
Okay.
hour.
I guess I should ask, is Taylor drinking as well?
She is, yes.
Okay. And is she drinking the same thing you are?
Yes,
And what is that?
Hawkeye vodka.
Again, I know you guys aren't measuring volumes, but how much of that vodka do you recall getting through?
Last time I remember, I would have been over 3/4 gone
Of the gallon that you purchased?
of the gallon, yes.
And that was between 11-ish, noonish that you arrived home and whatever the last thing is you remember.
Yes.
Now, what is the last thing you remember with respect to you and Taylor that night?
The last thing that I remember is laying down to go to bed with her. Or not laying down to go to bed, but laying down in bed talking to her. Is the last thing that I consciously remember doing.
And then after that, what was the next sort of time in which you have a firm recollection of what was taking place?
A firm recollection would be waking up in the hospital.
Thank you. Those are my questions at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Behal.
Good morning.
I'm going to cover some of the same ground you just did with Mr. Puentes, with a few extra questions. Just to confirm, as of March 13th and 14th of last year, you lived at 105 Crestview Drive, Apartment 4 in Parkview, Iowa,
Correct.
and Taylor Escontrias lived with you.
Correct.
The two of you shared a bedroom,
Correct.
you shared a bed,
Correct.
you were in a romantic relationship with her,
Correct.
and it was a sexual relationship.
Correct.
Did the two of you pool money?
What do you mean?
Well, for example, you went to a number of stores that day, Dollar General or Dollar Store, Hy-Vee, Casey's, etc. Who was paying for the items you purchased?
She was.
And she was purchasing things for both of you.
Correct.
Okay.
other than the foundation.
I think during your interview with Detective Rowling, you told him that there were some problems in your relationship with Taylor.
Correct?
You told him that Taylor always kind of made it seem like you weren't part of the relationship.
Correct?
And Taylor told you earlier on March 13th that it was a one-sided relationship.
Correct?
And you told Detective Rowling that Taylor was always talking shit
Correct?
and that it made you feel like shit,
Correct?
but you were trying to work on things with Taylor.
Correct?
I believe you just mentioned that as of March 13th and 14th, both you and Taylor had phones.
Correct?
And if I remember your interview right, that evening on the 13th, while you're playing cards, the two of you were taking turns playing music on Taylor's phone. Is that right?
On both of our phones.
Okay. And you recall Detective Rowling asking you where Taylor's phone was when he spoke with you on March 14th?
Correct?
And you knew where the phone should be?
Should have been by the bed. Correct?
Right, you told him it should have been right next to the bed on Taylor's side.
Correct?
And you knew Taylor's phone did not have a passcode or PIN.
Correct?
You mentioned going to the hospital. I want to talk with you about your injuries. You had a cut on your side,
Correct?
and you told Detective Rowling you had no idea how you got that cut.
Correct?
And you told Detective Rowling, for all you knew, you could have accidentally stabbed yourself.
Correct?
And you told Detective Rowling that you actually thought the cut came from the car accident.
Correct?
Okay? And you received treatment for that cut at the hospital.
Correct?
Okay? You got stitches.
Correct?
You did not have a concussion.
I do not know.
Okay? Your CT scans showed no acute findings when you're at the hospital, didn't it?
I don't know.
Now, may I approach the Elmo?
You may.
I'm going to show you some pages from Defense Exhibit 5, which are your medical records. You read the highlighted portion?
Can I? Yes.
Yeah, it says CT head and C-spine showed no acute findings. Is that right?
That is what it says, yes.
For reference for the record, that's page 115 of 137, which appears at page 136 of the PDF that forms Defense Exhibit 5. You were diagnosed with an abdominal laceration, alcohol intoxication, and hypokalemia.
I would assume so,
Let's
if
take a
that's what
look.
the record said.
Page 111 of 137 appears in your Exhibit 5 at page 132. It says diagnosis, abdominal laceration, alcohol intoxication, and hypokalemia. Is that
Correct?
right? Hypokalemia is a low level of potassium. Is that correct?
I am not sure.
Let's take a look at your discharge instructions. Page 130 of 137, which appears at page 151 of the PDF in Exhibit 5. Highlighted portion says hypokalemia is a low level of potassium. Did I get that right?
Correct?
It states this problem has many different causes. Kidney problems, diet, and medicines like diuretics and laxatives can cause it. So can vomiting or diarrhea. In some cases, cancer is the cause. Your doctor may do tests to find the cause of your low potassium levels. Did I get that right?
You did.
Word concussion doesn't appear anywhere in your records in Exhibit 5, does it?
Not that I have been shown, no.
Just to be clear, Your Honor, when I've referenced Exhibit 5, the defense did not use a letter label for that exhibit. It's marked as Defense Exhibit 5. Let's turn to your interview. Detective Rowling, at the start of it, asked you about your intoxication level,
I believe so.
and you told him you were feeling pretty lucid.
That is what was said, yes.
That's what you said.
Yes, that is what is said, yes. I apologize.
And on March 14th, you were coming off of a pretty long bender.
Yes,
You told Detective Rowling that you're a heavy drinker.
correct,
You told him you drink a lot,
correct,
that you're an alcoholic.
correct,
And you had been on a bender for about a week, then off for 2 to 3 days, and then you drank again on March 13th.
correct,
And it's normal for you when coming off a bender like that to not sleep for the next 3 or 4 days.
correct.
Detective Rowling spoke with you about what happened at your apartment the evening of March 13th to the 14th, and you gave Detective Rowling 2 different versions of what happened.
Correct.
The first version, you said you remembered Taylor getting a knife, you tried to take it away from her, she sliced you or slashed you with it, and you shoved her into a wall before getting the baseball bat.
Correct.
None of that was true.
No.
You made it up.
Correct.
But you did hit Taylor with a baseball bat.
As far as memory goes, yes.
You told Detective Taylor that you remembered hitting her with a bat.
Correct. As far as memory goes, yes.
All right, Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Show you State's Exhibit 23. Recognize this?
I do.
It's your baseball bat.
Correct.
This is the bat you hit Taylor with.
Correct.
That's your blood on the bat.
Correct.
When you hit her with that bat, Taylor was facing away from you.
As far as memory I can construe and sorry, I apologize. As far as my memory withstands, yes.
You told Detective Rowling that Taylor was facing away from you when you hit her with that bat.
Correct.
That she was on the ground, either crawling or kneeling.
That was what was said, correct?
That was what was said by you.
Correct.
And Taylor was within 5 feet or so of the front door to your apartment.
Correct.
You told Detective Rowling you believe Taylor was crawling toward the door when you hit her with the bat.
Correct.
And you told Detective Rowling you didn't know why Taylor was crawling toward the door.
Correct.
You thought it was probably to leave or get help or something.
Correct.
You told Detective Rowling you remember Taylor screaming.
Correct.
Taylor was screaming while she was trying to get to the door.
Correct.
And you told Detective Rowling that she stopped screaming when you stopped swinging the bat.
Correct.
This is a point I'm not clear on. Did you stop swinging when she stopped screaming, or did she stop screaming after you stopped swinging?
I am unaware.
Did you tell Detective Rowling you couldn't put an actual number on how many times you hit Taylor with a bat?
I believe so.
You thought it was maybe 6 times?
I believe so.
Dr. Klein testified about Taylor's blunt force injuries. You inflicted those.
I would assume so.
Okay. You inflicted 15 lacerations to Taylor's head.
According to evidence.
You inflicted 1 abrasion to her head.
According to evidence.
You inflicted 1 contusion to her head.
According to evidence.
You don't dispute that, do you?
I can't dispute the evidence in front of us.
You inflicted 1 abrasion to her back.
According to evidence.
You inflicted 6 contusions to her back.
According to evidence.
And you inflicted another 4 contusions to her upper extremities.
According to evidence.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Show you Exhibit 29. Recognize this?
I do.
That's your knife, isn't it?
It is.
It's got Taylor's blood on it.
It does.
And after you were done beating Taylor with the bat, Exhibit 23, you stabbed her with Exhibit 29.
I'm going to object argumentative.
It's sustained.
Can we approach?
You may.
All right, Mr. Behal, let me rephrase that. After you hit Taylor with a bat, you stabbed her with a knife that's State's Exhibit 37?
I believe that was what was said, yes.
Yep. And you told Detective Rowling you remember stabbing Taylor?
Yes,
You stabbed her in the throat
I believe that's what was said, yes.
by you?
Correct.
And you stabbed Taylor in the throat while she was by the front door to your apartment?
I believe that's what was said, yes.
By you?
me, correct.
And you told Detective Rowling you couldn't say why you stabbed her,
Correct.
but you thought maybe it was because Taylor was still moving and you might as well put her out of her misery given how much damage you'd already done to her.
Correct, that was what was said.
By you.
Correct.
You told Detective Rowling that you remembered stabbing Taylor with a knife 2 to 3 times.
Correct.
Do you still remember that as you sit here today?
Do I still remember exactly what? I'm sorry.
Let's break it down. Do you still remember stabbing Taylor that night, March 13th to 14th of 2024?
No.
Taylor had 6 stab wounds to her neck,
According to evidence, yes.
and she had another 7 stab wounds to her torso.
According to evidence, yes.
You don't dispute those?
I cannot dispute the evidence displayed.
All right. And you're the one that caused those stab wounds.
I am unaware.
Do you think someone else did it?
I cannot say for sure, either way.
Is that simply because sitting here today you'd forgotten stabbing her with the knife?
No, sir. What was being attested to is that I said to Detective Rawlings that she was stabbed 2 times, 2 to 3 times.
You told him, Detective Rowling, that you're the one who stabbed her 2 to 3 times.
I believe that's what was said, yes.
When you told Detective Rowling that you remembered stabbing Taylor, did you remember stabbing Taylor?
At the time, yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Show you State's Exhibit 25. Do you recognize this?
I do.
Is this your screwdriver?
It is.
It's got Taylor's blood on it.
Yes.
You told Detective Rowling you didn't remember anything about a screwdriver.
Correct.
Do you remember anything about a screwdriver today?
No.
Do you agree that you stabbed Taylor with that screwdriver?
No.
You agree she had 23 stab wounds from that screwdriver?
According to evidence, yes.
She had 9 stab wounds from the screwdriver in her head.
According to evidence, yes.
She had 3 stab wounds from the screwdriver in her neck.
According to evidence, yes.
6 stab wounds from the screwdriver in her torso.
According to evidence, yes.
5 more stab wounds to her right upper extremity.
According to evidence, yes.
And you did that to her.
I cannot say.
If you didn't do it, who did?
I cannot say.
You killed Taylor Escontrias?
I cannot say.
Do you remember talking to Detective Rowling about what you did after you stabbed Taylor in the throat with a knife?
I do.
Yeah. You told him that you debated whether to lie down?
I do.
And as you thought about lying down, you were like, no, then the cops are going to get me.
That was what was said, yes.
By you?
Correct.
And you decided to leave.
I cannot attest to that.
Did you tell Detective Rowling when you were interviewed on March 14th that you decided to leave?
I told him that I assumed that would have been what happened because I had, was found at the crash site in my car. I cannot attest to actually leaving.
Let's take a look at the actual recording.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, there's a matter I need to take up outside your presence. I would remind you of your admonition. Please do not discuss this case amongst yourselves, and please continue to keep an open and attentive mind. We'll be in adjournment for a brief moment. Thank you.
All rise for the jury.
Let the record reflect we're outside the presence of the jury. The defendant is present along with his counsel and counsel for the state. Mr. Jones, I know you wish to make an offer of proof, but before you do so, I would like to make a record of our previous bench conference and then make a record as to the last bench conference. The first bench conference was as a result of defense counsel's objection as to argumentative. There was a discussion about the question that was asked by the state. The defense made arguments as to the line of questioning. The court, at the time that the objection was made, took it as to the wording of beating rather than hitting. It was based on that the court made that ruling. And as a result, then the state said that they would rephrase. Is that a fair summation, Mr. Jones?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Mr. Puentes?
It is, Your Honor.
Thank you. The next bench conference was concerning the defense's objection to the last question asked by the state. The defense believes that was not an appropriate question as to Mr. Prentice, I'm going to let you make your argument since we're going to have an offer of proof by the state.
I appreciate that, Your Honor. And to be clear, I don't know that I yet have made the objection, but I did ask for the sidebar.
That's true.
This was being queued up to impeach my client, or at least an attempt to impeach my client, based on prior inconsistent statements, presumably, is what was going to be presented. My issue with that primarily is that that is an appropriate mechanism in the event that the defendant denies having made a statement. I think he's been consistent with the line of questioning thus far, either with respect to conceding that that's what the video showed, or indicating that he doesn't have any independent knowledge of it. Neither of those would be appropriate for impeachment because he hasn't denied having made the statement. I think he's almost in effect trying to refresh his recollection, but in a way that I don't think is allowed by the rules. So if he's trying to impeach again, the answer, at least as I recall, that was given by Mr. Behal, would not authorize impeachment at this purpose, at this time, because he had not actually denied having made the statement. That's all, Your Honor.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Your Honor. I obviously don't have a real-time transcript in front of me. I believe the question was, did you tell Detective Rowling that you then decided to leave? And then Mr. Behal responded saying, no, it was, I imagine that's what happened, something along those lines. I can't recall if I asked again, but you did tell him that you remembered, I can't recall how it went. The clip I was going to play is the portion of the interview with Detective Rowling that Mr. Behal and I are discussing, where he starts out saying something like he imagines he decided to leave, but by the end of it he says he did decide to leave. I believe that he does not remember taking his keys. I requested an opportunity to make an offer of proof so I can play the clip. Everyone can see what's involved, and the court can determine whether it's proper impeachment in these circumstances. So if Kim could please put me up, hopefully equipment is going to cooperate.
Stabbed her like 2 or 3 times around here. What do you remember after that?
Debating on if I was gonna leave, and then was like, no, and the cops are gonna get me, and so I guess I must have decided to leave. And that's all I remember is basically deciding to leave. I don't even remember grabbing my keys.
So Your Honor, in the clip just played, the defendant said he remembered deciding to leave, but did not remember where he's getting his keys, which I believe properly impeaches the statement the defendant just made in front of the jury.
One moment, please. After considering the defendant's answer to the question, I do find that it's proper impeachment and will allow the state to do so.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I'll bring the jury.
Is it useful when the jury's back in to read the last question and answer, just to get them back up to speed or not?
That's satisfactory to the state, Your Honor.
I'll ask my court reporter then to read the last question and response, and then you may proceed from that point.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That's right.
I'll just go back to this one.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Based on my rulings, I have been asked to have my court reporter read the last question that was asked by Mr. Jones and then the response by the defendant. After my court reporter has read that to you, then Mr. Jones will proceed.
Question, did you tell Detective Rowling when you were interviewed on March 14th you decided to leave? Answer, I told him that I assumed that would have been what happened because was found at the crash site in my car. I cannot attest to actually leaving.
Thank you, Your Honor. Kim, can you put me up, please? All right, so let's take a look at Exhibit 45. This will be a portion of the interview where the body camera date and timestamp starts at March 14, 2024 at 10:37 and 30 seconds a.m.
Stabbed her like 2 or 3 times around here. What do you remember after that?
Debating on if I was gonna leave, and then was like, no, and the cops are gonna get me, and so I guess I must have decided to leave. And that's all I remember is basically deciding to leave. I don't even remember grabbing my keys.
Mr. Behal, you didn't call 911?
Not that I recall, no.
Didn't try first aid.
Not that I recall.
You left the apartment.
It seems this way.
You left Taylor behind.
Correct?
She was dead or dying at the front door.
I would assume so.
And you left so the cops wouldn't get you.
I would assume so.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Puentes?
Just briefly, Mr. Behal, we just went at length through your video. Do you remember that?
Yes.
The video is evidence already. You don't contest the video in the condition that it's in, do you?
No, I do not.
Okay. Do you have, however, any actual independent recollection of what took place since your last drink to the time that you woke up in the hospital?
No, I do not.
No further questions.
No recross, Your Honor.
You may step down.
With that, Your Honor, we've exhausted our witnesses and the defense would rest.
All right. Could I see counsel at the bench, please? Ladies and gentlemen, as the defense has rested, there are some matters that I need to take care of in order to prepare this case for closing arguments and reading of the jury instructions. After you left on Friday, we did start some of that preliminary work, but there is still work for us to do in that regard. And so, as I said at the beginning, we're mindful of your time, and so rather than have you sit here and wait on us too much like you have on occasion, we're going to excuse you at this time, and I'm going to ask that you return at 1:50, and hopefully we'll start approximately 2 o'clock then with the remainder of the trial. All right? I would remind you once again of your admonition. Please do not discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else, and please continue to keep an open and attentive mind. Have a good lunch.